Hello, Canucks fans, and welcome back to another episode of the Canucks Conversation brought to you by the great folks at HSBC Rugby Sevens. My name is David Quadrelli. That is Harmon Dial. Harmon's got a new background, new background because we're doing the show remotely as we did yesterday. Today's show is also remote, and then we are back in the iconic Sheraton Wall Center in downtown Vancouver on January 2nd. But this is our final show of the calendar year 2023. Harm, what's going on in the background there? I love this. You got the dual lamps. It's a nice little setup you got there.
Yeah, and much better than the hotel rooms on the road where the lighting would actively fade out. No, this is the master bedroom. Had to makeshift set this up because the table that I normally record at was being used for other purposes and was really messy. So I like how this turned out. Honestly, I might turn this into a more regular set to use when we record virtually.
I love it. I love it. We've already got a lot of people in the YouTube live chat. Already got a couple anyone else's in there. People pointing out to me that there's only 7 weeks until pitchers and catchers report. Can't wait for that. Cannot wait for that. But we got to talk about those Vancouver Canucks today. And it was a weird game. It was an interesting game. It was a bit of a snooze fest. Like I think calling it sleepy, like I did an instant reaction, was probably the best way to describe that game. It was a sleepy effort by the Canucks, but it was also just a kind of a wait and see for the Philadelphia Flyers, and they waited and they saw a couple of mistakes from the Canucks, all within the span of 5 minutes. It felt like, and they took advantage, and we'll get to that. But first, I have to tell everybody about our presenting sponsor. As I said, HSBC World Rugby Sevens, Western Canada's largest sporting event. This year is the 9th time the event has visited Vancouver as part of the World Rugby Sevens series. HSBC Vancouver Sevens, where high caliber rugby and the ultimate party weekend collide. SVNS truly is a sporting event like no other, and a weekend you don't want to miss. For 3 full days from February 23rd to 25th, BC Place is going to be the place to be, folks. 12 women's and 12 men's sevens teams, including 2 Canadian squads, will take to the pitch for 3 full days of jam-packed rugby and partying. Tickets on sale now at vansevens.com, starting from just $40 per day. Speaking of ticket prices, I saw the price to get in last night. That was almost sold out building on a Thursday night. And I know a lot of people aren't working this week, but almost a sold out game. And I think I saw the cheapest resale ticket was like $160 to get into the building, Harmon. Those people did not get their money's worth. It's safe to say.
Yeah, I feel bad, especially through the first 30 minutes or so, the first half of the game. It felt like literally nothing was going to happen. Literally the most entertaining part of the game to that point was Quinn Hughes, when he broke his stick, making a defensive stop with his foot. Like the Flyers were trying to make a passing play off the rush, and Hughes soccer style kicks it away, and the crowd was into it for that. Marcus Naslund being in the building, that got a good standing O. But other than that, yeah, it definitely wasn't worth the price of admission, which honestly, we haven't said much about the Canucks this year. It was just one of those games where they weren't mentally sharp. They weren't turned on. They just weren't dialed in. And you could see it even in the types of goals that they surrendered. I mean, the Zamula one on the power play, that's a bit of a seeing eye shot, got a bit of a screen in front. That's different. There wasn't a huge defensive breakdown there. But you look at Sean Walker's rush goal, for instance, I think that was Philadelphia's second goal of the game. A big breakdown that you normally don't see, where the Canucks already had two of their wingers up deep, battling for the puck in the offensive zone. And Teddy Bluger, who's normally so responsible defensively and is quietly on a 7-game point streak, he uncharacteristically makes a bad read. Same sort of play that I was describing when Pettersson made a mistake in the San Jose game, where Bluger was the third forward and he's sort of the center. And when you're in that spot and you have your 2 wingers sort of caught down low battling, you got to make sure that you're staying above the play. And in that situation, Bluger bited. He was sort of going in to try and get the puck, and you just can't do that unless you're 100% certain you're going to get the puck back. So he got trapped, and all of a sudden it's a 3-on-2. So with Walker activating up, Bluger's a step behind, closing on him. That's just a basic fundamental that you don't want to make a mistake on. the Zadorov turnover. It was a brutal game for him as a whole, just serving up pizzas. But what struck me too wasn't just, okay, you're trying to make a fancy move in the neutral zone as the last man back, but it's what confused me was what was the upside of that play? Because those
Exactly.
players there, they still had 3 players back at the line. He probably would have still had to chip and chase anyway. It's one thing to try and make a dangle at, let's say, the offensive blue line, where if you make that play, you've got an odd man break, or you've got a lot of time and space to set something dangerous up. If Zadorov executed his play successfully, he still had to go through 3 Flyers players. It just made zero sense from a risk to reward standpoint. And then even in the third period, where after Bluger's goal, it looked like, okay, the Canucks are within 2 goals here. They got the power play. You're thinking, okay, can they make this interesting again? Instead of creating chances, building on that momentum on that shorthanded sequence. I mean, look, Ryan Poehling is one of the fastest players in the NHL, so I don't have too many problems with him first beating Quinn Hughes to that loose puck. What I had a problem with was Brock Besser was hustling back, but then puck watched. He wasn't on halfway at all, and DeSmith made that brilliant first save. But then you give him 2 chances. You can't surrender that type of look. The goalie just has no chance. So those are the types of mistakes that you look back at and go, they just weren't turned on mentally, which isn't too surprising because they're coming off the holiday break and top of the Western Conference. So you're naturally going to feel a little bit comfortable. It's only human nature for your habits and details to slip a little bit. And that's precisely why on yesterday's show, I was saying that I like the fact that they're having to play Philadelphia right away, because Philadelphia isn't as skilled at them as the Canucks are. But they're not going to give the Canucks any freebies, and if they don't bring their work boots, they're gonna lose this one, and that's exactly what happened.
And it looked like Rick Tocchet forced them to bring their work boots to practice today. As we saw some Twitter video, it looked like they were doing a bit of a bag skate, which I think is fitting after that game, because you just nailed it, Harman. It's not like the Philadelphia Flyers are a better team than the Canucks when it comes to their skill, but they outworked them last night. And look, like the Flyers have had that all season long. And I said it yesterday, so I'll try not to repeat myself too much. But look, that was a team that we saw them at the start of the year and thought, okay, that's a John Tortorella coach team. They're going to fall off by game 15 because all of the players are going to be too tired to keep that up. They haven't hit that wall yet. Like, they've just kept going. And I'll tell you what, as much talk as Rick Tocchet is getting for the Jack Adams here in Vancouver, and for good reason, John Tortorella's got to be right there if this Flyers team, even a wild card spot. Like, I was going to say, if they pick up a spot in the Metropolitan Division, like a top 3 spot in the division, which is it's a pretty loaded division. If they nail a spot there and hit the playoffs, like, you have to think that John Tortorella is in, at least in that conversation as well. And hey, like, Rick Tocchet's probably the favorite right now, sure, but like, it's going to be real close if John Tortorella takes these Flyers to the playoffs as well, because that'll be it. It'll be the work boots. It'll be the band of misfit toys getting coached really well. And yeah, you have to give it to them if they continue it. I don't even think you can question if they're going to fall off at this point now, because it's like, okay, well, the fall off would have happened already, you would think, right? And I know someone yesterday was pointing out that the Canucks were in a good spot heading into this year, this time of year, when John Tortorella was their coach as well. But obviously that was a little bit different as well. But I just found how they played very interesting, that they were, they're probably the hardest working team in the NHL.
Yeah, and it's a pretty close template for how the Canucks themselves need to play, because they have high-end skill, they have elite players, but they're not the type of team that is so structured and is so strong both up front on the back end that they can get away with sort of playing a loosey-goosey style. And honestly, I think the game in the league as a whole has sort of changed to where there aren't many teams that can have success sort of just playing a looser brand of hockey where they're on sometimes, off sometimes. I mean, maybe the Leafs get by in the regular season like that, but a great example is the Colorado Avalanche, where that's a team that in years past, I would watch them and go, they have so much skill, they have so much talent that they don't even need to be fully dialed in every game of the year. They can sort of coast at 60, 70, 80%, and they can beat teams in their sleep. But even watching the Avs lately, the other night, blowing a 4-0 lead against the Arizona Coyotes, and you have Devon Taves calling out some of his teammates, you're realizing that maybe it's parity. I don't know what the exact explanation is, but the list of teams in today's game that can just sort of put it in cruise control is so slim. And I honestly think it's good that the Canucks got this, you know, reality check pretty quickly coming out of this holiday break, because for their process moving forward for the rest of the regular season, and most importantly for the playoffs, you want them as dialed in and as sharp as possible. It's almost sometimes a detriment to a team if they have it too easy in the regular season, where they can again put it in cruise control, and then when the playoffs sometimes hit, it's like they haven't been playing that same level of intensity. I mean, I think back to Bruins and Panthers are a perfect example. The Bruins just sort of faced no adversity in the regular season, had a historic campaign, and then when the playoffs started, because the Panthers had been in this essentially a playoff style fighting just to get in for essentially the final 2-3 months of the season, they were just on and able to elevate their game when the playoffs started to a level that the Bruins just weren't able to sort of match. And so the way I kind of look at it is, again, coming out of the holidays and the Canucks feeling good after being top of the Western Conference, it's like when you wake up in the morning and you're feeling kind of tired and groggy, and you splash your face with some cold water and it sucks, but then it wakes you up. I look at that as last night's performance, where it's no big deal in the big picture. And actually, if it gets them dialed in for some of these practices headed into the new year, I think that can only be a positive.
Okay, so Harm, while you were away, Big Daddy Frank and I made a bet with Irf, who was filling in for you as your co-host. And Frank and I both said, I said it first, and then Frank agreed with me, and Irf didn't agree with us, so we made a bet. I don't know what we bet, but anyways, basically what we said was that the Canucks would not have another month of the season where they were below 500. Like it won't happen again for the rest of the year. And I think if it's going to happen, which I don't think it will, January is going to be the month, because right after they return on January 2nd, the Canucks have a bit of a gauntlet with the schedule. And Grady, if you could pull this up here, the schedule that the Canucks have to start the month of January, it is among the hardest that they're going to have for the rest of the season, just in terms of how often they're playing. And some of the opponents are not going to be easy ones to face off against. So you've got the game against the Ottawa Senators, obviously on the 2nd, and then it's the Blues, Devils, Rangers, Islanders, Penguins, Sabres, Blue Jackets. I know you've got some rather lackluster teams in there, but you still have a lot of games. Jeez, bad time to sneeze. A lot of games on the road in a pretty condensed amount of time. And look, when we look at what this team's done so far this season, the only time they really fell off was the month of November, when they had a schedule that was similar to this. Like, they weren't playing necessarily world beaters, but they were playing a lot, and they were playing on the road for a long time. So this is their longest road trip of the year. They've had one already, obviously, to start the year that was just as long, but it's going to be interesting to see where the Canucks are by mid-January. That's what we have to look forward to. They got a bit of a gauntlet, and then it's smooth sailing from there. We already know they've basically punched their ticket to the playoffs already, but it's going to be interesting to see them kind of be in that playoff mode, because you just brought it up. They're not going to have much time to take their foot off the gas, and hopefully yesterday was a splash of cold water on their faces. Let's bring him in. Our pal Jeff Paterson is brought to you by Wendy's Daily Face-Off Survivor Pool Game. Wendy's is letting you win real food with your fantasy teams this year and Daily Face-Off. For those of you who smoke the competition, Wendy's is rewarding you with weekly prizes that will have you winning. Download the Wendy's app and score yourself 150 bonus reward points on your first order, and grab a sweet victory from the mouth-watering jaws of defeat, along with some fresh, never frozen beef. Sign up to play Daily Face-Off Survivor Pool game to win weekly prizes like the spicy chicken sandwich from Wendy's and the Wendy's app. I forgot to play this week, so I have no update on that, but I'll be back. I'll be back next week playing that game that I have yet to win.
Not playing might be the strategy for you to last as long as possible.
That's right. Just recharge. Just take a chance to recharge. Just think about the past games that we've played and what went wrong. It's not my fault. It's the players who aren't playing well enough for me. So I'm just gonna throw that out there. Okay, Jeff Paterson. Let's bring him in. Our man, J Pat, at the rink. Jeff, how cold are you right now?
I'm all right. I came prepared today. Brought a heavy jacket on top of the hoodie. Cold water, by the way, a splash of cold water, no issue. Whatever that was coming through the screen after your sneeze there, that's a little more of a concern to me. So I kind of feel like I'm in the danger zone here joining you this afternoon.
We call it the splash zone, but don't worry, we're not in studio, so you're okay, Jeff. Jeff, tell me about Canucks practice today. We'll get to the game with the Flyers, but I want to hear about the practice because we all know how the game against the Flyers went. Looked like there was a bit of a bag skate there. Did I see that correctly on Twitter?
There was a skate at the end. I think firm but fair was sort of the tone of this practice. If people thought that Rick Tocchet was going to lose it and 4 days here between games and it was essentially going to be a training camp again, there was none of that. Was there a little bit of skating at the end? Sure. I'm always up for goaltenders having to do the skating drills as well because it just looks funny in all their gear as they labor up and down the ice. But it certainly didn't cross any lines. This wasn't punishment for last night. This was Rick Tocchet with a plan in place. Most of the practice was 5-on-5 today. I have to think that some of Saturday's practice will be devoted to special teams because the power play is becoming more of an issue, and I think that's becoming more apparent every game out for the Vancouver Canucks, and it certainly was against the Philadelphia Flyers. There was a big hit at one point. Nikita Zadorov caught Andrei Kuzmenko, and they both went down in a heap, and that drew a big reaction from the fans, from Kuzmenko. It was just solid contact, and when you're Nikita Zadorov and you're 6'6" and 240 pounds, if you get the better of any player in the NHL, you're probably going to send him flying. And so Kuzmenko got up, trademark smile on his face. Of course, the big news, if we can call it that, was Phil DiGiuseppe back on the left side with JT Miller and Brock Besser. And so, that rotating wheel of wingers continues. And Nils Höglander had certainly he earned his opportunity with his play, but kind of quietly here. 1 goal in his last 9, scored the deflection goal in Nashville when Harm was out on the road trip. So he saw that with his own 2 eyes, but Höglander's got a little quiet. The effort level is still there, but they're trying to find somebody that can bring that level of play up on that line, because when I talk about things going quietly, guys, like nobody seems to be talking. Are people listening here when I say it? JT Miller's got 1 goal in his last 8 games. Hasn't scored 1 goal in his last 10 and 2 in his last 16. And so, it can't just be that third line that you rely on all the time. Now, is Phil DiGiuseppe the answer? I would say no. He started the year there. He earned that opportunity with a strong training camp and a preseason. But his last 24 games, guys, 1 goal, and that was an empty netter in Montreal. He hasn't beaten an NHL goaltender since October 27th at home against the St. Louis Blues. So you're not looking for a ton of offense from Phil DiGiuseppe, but at the same time, that's a top 6 role on this hockey club. And so I don't think you can completely ignore that. But I think, for DiGiuseppe to be successful there, it's back to the staples, forecheck, separate guys from the puck, hound pucks, turn them over. I think to opening night, that Brock Besser goal, when that was textbook, when DiGiuseppe got in on the forecheck, stripped the puck, Miller sets up Besser, they need more of that from Phil DiGiuseppe. So, it's kind of back to the future, I guess, with this hockey club, and we'll see if, second time around for PDG works as well as it did in the early going, because, he was a fit there for the first handful of games, but his play has tailed off to the point he's been a healthy scratch 5 times in the last month.
J-Pat, I think a lot of people would have understood shaking up that Miller line and maybe bumping Höglander further down the lineup, but it appeared that he was potentially the extra, potentially makes him in line to be a healthy scratch against Ottawa. Do you think if the coaching staff goes down that route of making Höglander a healthy scratch, is that justified, or do you think that's a bit harsh?
Yeah, it feels harsh to me. I mean, he's a double-digit goal scorer on a team that, again, some of the primary guys haven't been doing an awful lot offensively. And Höglander, I thought he had played himself to a point where he was out of consideration. And I guess nobody can ever, feel that comfortable. But I thought he had done enough to be a regular. I still find it kind of wild that he can't get a spot on the second unit power play when Pius Suter or Sam Lafferty or Ilya Mikheyev even continue to be fixtures on the second unit. Again, the power play, whether it's the top unit or the second, nobody's having much success these days. But, I kind of think that Nils Höglander becomes almost a scapegoat in this case. And again, this team's done so much winning. It was one loss, but a bad loss against Philadelphia. I don't want to see rash changes. Now their options are somewhat limited, but I am surprised that, a guy like Nils Aman, I suppose, can keep his spot in the lineup. They've got lots of guys that can do some penalty killing, but clearly they like him on for that reason. And that seems to be what keeps him in the lineup on a nightly basis right now. But I don't know. I think this team is better with Nils Höglander in the lineup and having opportunities to contribute. If he has to drop a little bit lower, that's fine. But him coming all the way out, I'm not sure that I totally agree with that move.
Jeff, just your takeaways from last night's game. I feel like there's so many talking points. I don't want to steer you in one direction, so just give us whatever you want about that debacle of a game last night.
Yeah, the first period was awful hockey. Sat there in the press box with Harm, and I think universally across the board on press row, kind of wish that there could be a do-over after 20 minutes. Just scrub that from the memory banks and try again. And some of that's coming out of the holiday break, I suppose, but both teams are. The break was essentially the same, and Philly had to fly cross-continent. The Canucks should have had an advantage. Rick Tocchet liked their practice on that first day back on Wednesday. Had a spirited morning skate. They should have been ready to go. And this is becoming a bit of an issue. You think back to the Minnesota game here earlier in the month when, they won 2-0, but it took them 14 minutes to get a shot on goal. You think of the game in Chicago after the shootout loss in Minnesota, they were being outshot 10-0 by the Blackhawks. And I know it was back-to-back. So these sluggish starts, again, they've found ways to overcome them. It's impossible to argue with the record. They had picked up 9 points in 9 straight games, but it's about reevaluating the standards and trying to play as close as you can to a complete 60 minutes. And they certainly didn't do that against the Flyers. So the start wasn't great. Obviously, those 3 goals in short succession in the second period did them in. For me, though, and you asked me or you didn't want to steer me, I'll jump on the soapbox here and talk about a power play that is 10th in the NHL. And I guess on the surface, if people look and they say, hey, a top 10 power play, really how bad is it? But, it's running at 12% over the last 6 games. That's not good enough. The 2 power play goals in that stretch against San Jose and against Chicago. Well, guess what? There are a lot of better teams in the NHL than the Blackhawks and the Sharks. So the last 6 games, power play hasn't been great. If you go back earlier in the month, the last 15 games, the power play is working at around 14%. You dial it all the way back to the night the Islanders were here when the Canucks scored 3 times in mid-November. Since then, this is a power play that's running at around 16%. So more than half the season, the last 20 games, the power play at 16%. That's not good enough. That's not good enough. It's not good enough on balance, but it's not good enough when you think of the assembled talent that they've got here. So absolutely torch teams in the early going this season. Power play looked unstoppable. It was running up over 30%. Was it going to stay there? Probably not, although the Oilers did last year. And it really has just kind of fallen off a cliff over the last 20 games. And so I'm curious to see. It was all 5-on-5 work at practice, no special teams whatsoever. I have to think that some of Saturday's practice will be devoted to the power play. Sunday's going to be a team day off for them, and then they get back at it on Monday ahead of the Tuesday game against Ottawa. So they've got some time in here. But for me right now, it is about a power play. Like Quinn Hughes has 1 power play point in his last 14 games. How? You guys are smart hockey minds. Make that make sense. He had 15 power play points in the first 22 games of the season. He has 1 in the last 14. Like that, it just boggles my mind. So teams are adapting. Life is about making changes. If other teams are trying to take Quinn Hughes away, you've got an extra player out there on the ice. Like find that extra player, find that extra space, create 2-on-1 opportunities elsewhere and exploit those. But I'm losing sleep right now over the fact that Quinn Hughes has 1 power play point in the last 14 games. That just makes no sense to me whatsoever.
J-Pat, I wanted to ask you just big picture. We're about to turn the calendar over to 2024. When you look back at 2023, it's been a bit of a whirlwind for the Canucks. So many changes, coming in January, the Bo Horvat trade, a surprising deadline where they made the move for Hronek, and of course leading to this really impressive season so far. What will you remember most about 2023 from a Canucks perspective?
Yeah, I guess you go back to that third week of January when they made the coaching change. Obviously, I'll remember Bruce's final night behind the bench. Never seen anything like that and probably won't ever again. But, that is water under the bridge now. I wasn't necessarily on board with the coaching change at the time when you had Connor Bedard out there. And I know it was going to be a long shot, but I guess in a parallel universe, would have loved to have seen the Canucks up their lottery odds just to see where the balls might have taken them. They elected to go in the complete opposite direction, though, and they felt those 36 games with a new head coach would allow him to put his structure in place so that they could hit the ground running. They got it right. I mean, the proof's in the pudding now when you look at the record that they've got near the top of the league, 36 games in. And so Rick Tocchet had 36 games at the end of the season. He's had 36 games to this point now. They have 10 outright losses. So, 2023 was the year that structure finally arrived in Vancouver, and it has served the Canucks well. But yeah, it was a year of transition, but so was the year before. And unfortunately for them, the previous attempt, it was kind of like spinning wheels. And it does feel now like they have surrounded their good players with better supporting cast. That third line right now going about as good as any line in hockey. So they've still got a long way to go. And it was interesting, Dave, as I was waiting to join you guys and you were talking about, the month of January and that long 7-game road trip. I think if there's a month where they may struggle to hit 500, look at it February. Like they start to play some of the really good teams in the National Hockey League, and that has been an issue. Like they have feasted on bottom feeders. Edmonton, when they were struggling, obviously took care of San Jose in 3 of 4. You look at what's left on their schedule, though, guys. Like they haven't seen the LA Kings. They've played one game against Vegas. They haven't played Boston yet. They haven't played Winnipeg. They haven't seen Detroit having a decent season. Washington's been a bit of a surprise, but they don't give up an awful lot, and they're playing well. They haven't played Arizona yet, and the Arizona Coyotes having a nice year. And, those teams that I mentioned, if you look at the standings, are all in the top 10 defensively in terms of goals against. And when you look at trying to break down Philadelphia last night, when you try to look at breaking down both of the games against Minnesota this month, I mean, they beat the Wild 2-0, but then they only scored 1 goal in Minnesota. They had trouble breaking down the Wild. Vegas came in here, ran their show. They scored 1 goal when it was already 4-0 for the Golden Knights. So, I am curious to see. I think this team knows what's coming, but will they be prepared to pass some of those tests against the really good teams and the stingy teams defensively? Like it's fun to score the goals when it's 8, 9, 10 against the Sharks and you're lighting up the Oilers 8-1 on opening night. But when you play these grinding games, and Rick Tocchet talked about the need to be comfortable in scoreless games midway through a hockey game, and I'm not sure that the Canucks felt all that comfortable last night against the Philadelphia Flyers. So that's, to me, what I'm excited about. They've set themselves up now. They've positioned themselves beautifully for a second half. I still think this is absolutely a playoff team, but there are going to be tough tests against some of the really good teams in the National Hockey League. The Canucks believe that they're one of them. But let's see how they fare and how do they go about generating offense on those nights where you have to squirm and you've got to fight for every inch of ice that's out there. Because to me, that's something that this team hasn't done a good enough job of on too many nights this season.
All I'm hearing is that my bet with Earth, Frank and I's bet with Earth, we might come out on the losing end of that for 2 straight months. That's all I'm hearing, Jeff.
Well, they've earned the benefit of the doubt. Like last night was a bad game. It was, but they've been a good team at bouncing back. So I'll give them every opportunity. Ottawa plays twice in the Eastern time zone before they have to fly out here for the game on Tuesday. Like there's no excuse. Like the Canucks should be sitting here lying in wait for the Senators. They've already beaten Ottawa once this year. The Senators don't have a ton of goaltending. And so it's kind of perfect scenario for the Canucks to have a bounce back game against an Ottawa team that has played so much less hockey than anybody else that they've got this crazy second half schedule. And part of that is, a couple of games here between Christmas and New Year's, and then they have to fly cross continent. So, they better be better on Tuesday night. It would be hard not to be.
Jeff, quickly here, I just want to get your thoughts on this. Final question here. A lot of conversation right now about trading for a top 6 winger. And I have to be completely honest with you. The longer I watch the third line be the only line to produce and PDG in the top 6, the more I say, go get someone. Like, go get someone. I don't care if it's a big fish. Like, I wrote for all I want for Christmas is go get Elias Lindholm. Whatever it costs, go get Elias Lindholm. Add Elias Lindholm to this team. You're laughing. Your thoughts on adding a winger? Like, is this team going to do this at some point?
Well, Jim Rutherford certainly has history on his side, so I'm not betting against it. And Patrick Alvin has learned from his boss, and he's been as active as anybody, as people know. So, yeah, I mean, I think the Canucks recognize that they've made their move for a defenseman. They're getting Carson Soucy back here. He was an extra paired with Mark Friedman at practice, so we'll see where that goes in the days ahead. But first look, when he was out here for a full practice, he was basically the seventh defenseman. But I think with that defense core and the goaltending that they've had most nights this year, I think they feel pretty comfortable in that regard. So that to me puts the focus squarely on a top six that has some star power, but also has some glaring weaknesses. And I'm with you. I think now that's where the attention turns, and it's a question of, do you go and get a play driving winger with some scoring chops, or are you really looking for another center so that JT Miller is that play driving winger that has the scoring potential? And I think that creates some opportunity and some options for the Vancouver Canucks. They don't have to pigeonhole themselves in finding the best winger available. If you can find a guy that has some versatility, maybe that allows the flexibility to slide JT Miller over to the wing. Whatever the case, Elias Pettersson's production has slowed down considerably, and I think part of that is he's been asked to play with different line mates. Kuzmenko's been in and out of the lineup. Sam Lafferty got a chance. Pius Suter. I'd love to find an upgrade there so that Elias Pettersson could establish chemistry and play with regular line mates and guys that can finish more than Kuzmenko has. Now, if they could get, wave the magic wand and get Andrei Kuzmenko of last year back and being that player, that'd be great. But I'm not feeling that. And, again, Elias Pettersson got off to this incredible start, charged out of the gates and was leading the NHL in scoring. He's not even a point-a-game guy over the last 18 games, though. If you split the 36 games they've played in half, in the most recent 18, he's got 15 points. So, he's close to a point a game, and I'm not panicking about him, but we know that he's capable of so much more, but he can't do it alone. And so, yeah, I think if they recognize that this is an opportunity, and I also think really, and Dave, I know you wrote about this recently, the opportunity, I think, is to win the Pacific Division and avoid that 2-3 matchup. That it's not just about, bettering your chances and being as good as you can. The stakes are massive here because that 2-3 matchup in the Pacific Division, a really good team. I think a team with legitimate Stanley Cup aspirations is going to be out after the first round. And that's just the way it goes in these divisional playoffs. And unfortunately for the Canucks, they may be in that 2-3 spot, and the matchup may not be favorable for them. So they haven't seen the Kings. Let's see what those teams all look like after the trade deadline. But yeah, I think if this team is going to maximize its potential and recognize the opportunity in front of it, that it needs an upgrade in that top six without a doubt.
Jeff, great stuff as always. Thanks so much for joining us. Happy New Year. This will be the last time we talk to you for the year 2023, and we will see you next week and next year. I had to make that joke. I'm sorry.
Well, at least you didn't sneeze, so we got that going for us. But hey, it's been fun with you guys throughout this hockey season. It's been a fun hockey season, and we love talking about it and breaking it all down. And so lots of those moments ahead. Happy New Year to you guys and to all your viewers and podcast listeners as well.
Jeff, thanks so much, man. Appreciate it. That was Jeff Paterson. A lot of good stuff. And Harm, I gotta be honest, man. I'm 3, maybe 4 weeks away from just throwing out the quads plan. And I had a quads plan last year and it didn't work out. But I think this year I'm getting closer to going completely unhinged and just throwing out a trade package to go get both Elias Lindholm and Adam Henrique. And those are your two moves. You got to make those two moves, and all of a sudden you've got a very good team here. And look, I'm not there yet. But I'm 3 weeks away from throwing that out there.
As rentals, is that
literally as rentals? You're not going to re-sign either of them. You're just doing it because you want to load up for this run.
No.
Okay.
No.
Okay, so hear me
out.
You
want to give up a first round pick for a rental? I get it. On the one hand, you look at the timeline for Demko's contract, Hughes' contract, Miller being at 30. I think he's 30 right now. And this being one of the best seasons you're going to get from that contract. How well everything is clicked. Yes, this is a year I think to add. Absolutely. But, and I wouldn't be opposed to rentals if it's, let's say, that second tier. Henrique is a rental. I wouldn't mind that,
Sure.
right?
Yep.
But if we're talking about ponying up in a first in a good prospect for Lindholm as a rental, that's too far for me.
So Lindholm is going to be the number one trade target as we approach the deadline, right? Just looking in years past, like I'm not convinced Lindholm is going to be I don't know. It's 1 year left on the deal.
Look at that Bo Horvat package. Isn't that the
Exactly,
perfect comp?
and that's what I'm trying to think if there's a better. Was there a better deal, or was Bo Horvat the top trade target last year?
What did Meyer go for again?
Too much, and he's getting paid too much as well. But
Although
like I'm trying to look
Meyer
it
was
up,
an
and
RFA, so not quite the same thing.
little different, exactly. So like let's use the Bo Horvat one because that's the one I want to use. Like Bo Horvat, that deal was less than what you would usually give up like in years past, right? Because like what's the Canucks equivalent if they make that trade with the Calgary Flames? Like they're going to get Elias Lindholm. Like what's your equivalent to that?
First,
Because
Ratu.
no. Like let's be honest here. Like you're looking for like Achiratu's like a B A minus prospect. Like he's not an A plus prospect or anything like that. So you're not giving up Tom Willander. You're not giving up Jonathan Lekarmaki. Both guys we have discussed being vital that they hit on ELCs. You're not giving up either of those guys to go get Elias Lindholm. And the Islanders were able to re-sign Bo Horvat. The Canucks aren't going to be doing that with Elias Lindholm. They're probably not re-signing Nikita Zadorov. So this is for a rental. So I'm just looking at it and saying, okay, let's say you can give up the 2025 first round pick is obviously the one that would be more ideal in my opinion. You want to keep this one because like you and I have discussed many a times before, you need more first round picks to hit if you're going to be a playoff team for years. So you're not mortgaging the future too hard. You're doing it with your competitive window, and you need to identify when that competitive window is. And Harm, in my opinion, you just laid it out. The Quinn Hughes contract, the Thatcher Demko contract, that ain't that long. So you need to go all in here because you don't want to get to the level of being where, yes, you're in the playoffs, but all of a sudden you're the New York Islanders and you can't do anything in the playoffs and you're just in this level of mediocrity, but at least you're on the right side of mediocrity where you're actually making the playoffs. Sure, you're not where the Canucks were for years under Jim Benning, but how much better is it to get bounced in the first or second round every single year? I don't know, man. I'm just looking at it and saying, this is a year where if you go out and you get Elias Lindholm, like if you add Elias Lindholm to this team, they are significantly better. Like this is a significantly better team if you add Elias Lindholm to it. You have the flexibility of moving JT Miller to the wing. You have the flexibility of putting him with Elias Pettersson and having him play the wing or having Elias Pettersson play the wing, whatever. You have a better face-off man on the Elias Pettersson line. Maybe that line can start taking matchups, freeing up easier matchups for JT Miller and his line mates. Just acquiring this guy, and I threw it out right before Christmas as this isn't going to happen, but it would be great if it did. Now I'm thinking, and I said I was 3 weeks away. Turns out that's happening today. Now I'm thinking you could put together, like, Harm, tell me if you do this package or not, or if it's a comparable of what the Canucks gave up to get Bo Horvat. You would be giving them a contract because the Canucks took back Anthony Beauvillier. That was part of it, right? You'd be giving them, like, I don't know, Connor Garland, Nikita Zadorov, I don't know, one of those two. Pick whoever you want. You're giving them a contract to make room for Elias Lindholm, right? You are giving them a B+ / A- prospect who, like maybe it's even Nils Höglander that Calgary is looking for, right? Let's say you're giving them, just for argument's sake, the package is Connor Garland, Nils Höglander, and the 2025 first round pick. Are you doing that trade to grab Elias Lindholm in like, not even at the deadline, like ahead of the deadline, like you're getting him for most of the month of February?
No.
Why?
I'm not. Well, also look at, okay,
10.
You're giving up Garland, right? And obviously Lindholm's a better player than Garland, but is he that much better that I'm also going to give up a first round pick and another piece? Yes. Well, I'll tell you this much: the moment Garland's gone, that third line is falling off cliff.
That's a good point. Maybe
because I'll tell you this: the third line's one of the best third lines in the NHL right now. Who do you think is driving it? Connor Garland, who historically has been a terrific 5-on-5 performer, or do you think it's Beluga and Joshua, who before this year have been fourth liners?
Yep, you're right. And the chat is jumping in with a lot of no quads. Here's the comments in succession. Hell no quads, no quads, no quads. Stirring the pot, not a chance. Bad trade quads. So okay, let's say it's not Connor Garland. Maybe I was a little short-sighted there. Let's say it's not Connor Garland. Let's just say it's Nikita Zadorov. Well, the point is you're just trying to make the money work, okay? And yes, Connor Garland is bringing more value to this team. So let's just say it's Nikita Zadorov. For whatever reason, it's Nikita Zadorov because you're just trying to make the money work, okay? Are you making that trade?
Still no, because I'll say this. The problem with the Canucks right now is even like they could finish really high in the West, and I still think that they're probably not going to finish first in the Pacific. Given the way LA and Vegas are on paper, Canucks haven't, as JPat mentioned, they haven't played LA once. They've only played Vegas. They've only played Vegas once, so the schedule does get tougher in the second half. And as much as many times on the show we've spoken about how we're not worried about PDO and regression because the Canucks have a cushion and so many other parts of the team have been working well, at some point there is still going to be some level of drop off there because Canucks are shooting above 11% at 5-on-5 right now. There is not a single NHL team since 2007 that's finished a season shooting 11% or higher. So there is some, like, even if it's a little bit, there is still some drop off coming. And if you're not going to win the Pacific, you're trading a lot for rental, and you might still end up playing Vegas or LA in round one of the playoffs. That's still a tough matchup. I would still think the Canucks are the underdog there. It's just, look, I wouldn't be opposed to giving up a first round pick for the right type of player somewhere between the next 6 to 12 months. But it has to be the right age contract fit. And I don't think a rental's the right fit.
That's way too logical. You're probably bang on because you bring up a really good point that, look, I'm basing a lot of this off you got to go for first in the Pacific because it's such an advantage, but then it turns into a disaster if you don't get there, and there is a good chance that the Canucks don't get there. And here's a better one. Here's a better trade. Okay, ready? This one from Michael Lashano. Kuzmenko, Podkolzin, and the 2025 first round pick. Come on, Harm. For Elias Lindholm.
For me, that's not a bad proposal, but I just still don't want to give up a first for a rental. I can't. The downside risk of giving up a first for a rental and then playing LA or Vegas in round one, where you're probably the underdog, is the downside risk is too high there. And again, I'm not opposed to adding in that second tier, or again, a player like Henrique, I wouldn't mind. But man, I'd prefer to hold on to that first, because imagine then in the offseason, there's, let's say, the ideal like second line center available on the trade market where you're like, okay, we can bump Miller to the wing then. Or let's say there's another right shot top four defenseman, a high end piece that you really, really like. Keeping in mind that the Canucks have several expiring defensemen on the current roster, like Cole, like Zadorov. So you have sort of needs that you might want to fill there. You might be thinking, oh, that's a great target for us as a medium-term fit. But if you then don't have a first-round pick in your trade arsenal, then you aren't able to make that move. So the point I'm trying to make is, yes, there's going to be a time and place where giving up a first makes sense, but you have to be very strategic and certain that it's the best return on your investment. And I don't think a rental is the best return on your investment this year.
Sticking with rentals, no, I'm not going to do too much more, but like, I really like Adam Henrique. Like, I think Adam Henrique is probably, like, he is in that second tier, obviously, probably in the twilight of his career, but like, he's an upgrade on PDG. Like, I think that's the conversation we've been having since the start of the year is you can't go into a playoff run with Phil DiGiuseppe as this team's second line winger, and all of a sudden he's right back there. So I don't know, like, obviously you hope Höglander just kind of bounces back after, I don't know, like a couple bad games maybe, but I don't know. I like the idea of going out and doing something this year. It's just, I don't know, man. Maybe I'm too into just straight fun hockey, because Elias Lindholm on this team would be super fun. Like Elias Lindholm on this team would be so much fun. And I think that's what I'm basing this off of. So you're probably right. You're probably bringing way more logic to the conversation than I am. But I don't know, man. I really like me some Elias Lindholm, and I think he'd be a really nice fit on this team. But maybe we'll leave that up to Santa Claus. So far, he has not delivered. Okay, let's get to our prospect report, brought to you by our friends at 4 Winds Brewing. Family owned and operated in Delta, home to the 4 Winds Light Lager, a crisp, clean, and easy drinking beer, a beer for everyone, a perfect beer for before, after, or during the game. World Juniors are on. Go order yourself some 4 Winds Light. Ask for 4 Winds Light Lager at your local liquor store or have some delivered right to your door through the online shop at 4windsbrewing.ca. And I'll tell you what, Harm, the 4 Winds Brewing were flowing today in many Canadian households because Tom Willander opened the scoring for Team Sweden. Well, I guess maybe not many Canadian households, maybe many Vancouver Canucks fans households, because Tom Willander opened the scoring for Sweden against Canada today as the Swedes took down Team Canada by a final score of 2-0, with Tom Willander scoring the first goal and Jonathan Lekkerimäki being instrumental in the second goal of this game. He picks up the primary assist, but like I said, he was instrumental, kind of got created off of a shot from Jonathan Lekkerimäki, which you like to see. I'm really liking what I'm seeing from both of these guys. And we have the Willander goal here, don't we, Grady? Let's bring it up. Tom Willander opening the scoring for Sweden, just walking in and rifling one. And I'll tell you what, Harm, this guy's going to be signing at the end of this year. You heard it here first, folks. He's signing. He's going to go right on to Quinn Hughes' wing, and it's going to be magical watching those two play together. But yeah, I liked it. In all seriousness, probably going to be next season, not this season, but I like what I've been seeing from Tom Willander at this tournament, especially this goal.
Yeah, he's been solid. And also shout out to Elias Pettersson on the back end there. He's been solid. He's been physical, eating up a ton of important minutes. There was a 2-on-1 odd man break that Canada had, and Pettersson played it perfectly. The way that he timed his poke check, his diving poke check, Myers should be taking notes. It was a beautiful breakup, and so all 3 Canuck prospects have been promising in this tournament so far. I mean, more good stuff from Lekkerimäki, where the assist wasn't anything special. It was a long point shot that created a rebound, but the play beforehand as a whole, I thought was an encouraging sequence where first he gets that slot chance in the middle, grade A look, gets denied, but even as Sweden recovered the puck and he regained possession, I liked the level of deception I've been seeing from him this year, not only at World Juniors, but even in the little bit of SHL tape I've caught, where he can throw defenders off with his body movement. And what I mean by that is, after Sweden recovered the rebound, Lekkerimäki sort of gets the puck, somewhat high in the offensive zone, sort of cutting across, gets towards the middle, and then he drops his shoulder as if he's going to take a shot. But instead, he keeps cutting across, creates that little bit of space, and makes a pass back to the point. Obviously, eventually leads to the goal. But the point I'm trying to make is there's a level of confidence and poise I'm seeing with him with the puck, especially with, to me, it's the deceptiveness that is going to bode well for him long term that I didn't see as much of last season that I'm encouraged to see now.
Yeah. I mean, it's like we said with Dave yesterday, like you have to be pleased with everything that every Canucks prospect, all 3 of them, are doing at this tournament. And hey, like 2-0 over Canada, that's a statement game. Like that's going to, like, that sets the bar. They were favorites coming into this tournament, but look, I know Team Canada wasn't in that kind of conversation with the USA and Sweden, but with Sweden playing the way they did today, they really cemented it for everyone to see, and it's going to be interesting to see how this tournament shakes out. Grady, can we see the Willander goal one more time? I just want to take another look. It is a beauty. Oh, just beautiful. And of course, credit to TSN for the clip, but my goodness, just look at that. And RW Hockey in the chat said nothing special. Goalie was screened. I don't know about that. I don't know about that. I think you're just looking at a Canadian goalie and he looks screened all the time. Anyways, let's get to anyone else. I'm kind of bad time management by me here. But let's get to anyone else presented by DoorDash. It's our listeners' chance to get involved and hit us up in the YouTube live chat. It's also our listeners' chance to get 25% off and 0 delivery fees on their first order of $15 or more. That's right. For a limited time, our listeners can get 25% off and 0 delivery fees on their first order of $15 or more when they download the DoorDash app and enter code NATION25. That's all capital letters, nation, and the numbers 25. Offer valid in Canada, subject to change. Terms, of course, do apply. Okay.
By the way, I
we
was going to
got something
say,
here.
I wanted to quickly say, I was thinking back to our discussion earlier, and you know what the dream scenario for the Canucks would be related to the deadline? It's not going to happen, but I want to mention it anyway. The New Jersey Devils are sort of fighting for their playoff lives right now. The dream scenario would be that they fall out and realize that they can't afford to keep Tyler Toffoli beyond the season, and the Canucks reacquire Toffoli as a rental like they did in 2019-20 for a similar price. What was it, a second-round pick and Tyler Madden? So just a second and some other prospect. That would be, I think, an awesome scenario.
Who's the equivalent of Tyler Madden right now?
I'd have to think about it. I don't want to just throw out a name without
Max Sasson.
really. No, but it would. I mean, Tyler Madden was like a B prospect at the time. He wasn't anything special.
That's the interesting thing though, because yeah, you're right. He was nothing special, but he's still a 3rd round pick, and he still carried a higher pedigree than a guy like Max Sasson, who I obviously threw out as a joke. But like, is Aatu Ratu Tyler Madden? Because I think he's higher.
Yeah.
He's higher, and that's what I find so interesting, is because Tyler Madden was somebody that we were all looking at the time and being like, well, you can't give up Tyler Madden. Like, you can't be giving up Tyler Madden right now. Like, you need him to hit. And of course, he didn't hit for anybody. But now you're in Aatu Ratu territory, and you're thinking the exact same thing. And it's good. I'm just saying it's gonna be interesting in 5 years if we're like, man, I can't believe the Canucks didn't give up Aatu Ratu for Tyler Toffoli. And I love that. I love that you brought that name up.
The Devils are probably going to get back on track. They're too good of a team. So
yeah, they'll be okay. They'll be fine. Okay. This one from Jeremy Lee. Is there anything that the NHL should adopt from the AAHF? 3-point system, VR for penalty calls. Yeah, I think both of those things. Those are probably the 2 things that I would pick out. I really like the 3-point system. I think if the NHL was using the 3-point system, the Canucks would be way higher than everybody else right now with all their regulation wins. And then VR for penalties. Yeah, just nobody likes to see penalties get missed and get called incorrectly. So I like both of those.
I like the 3-point system for sure, especially because it would spice up playoff races. It feels like a lot of years when think about the Canucks in 2021-22 when Green got fired midway through and they were on this incredible run with Boudreau, but it was so hard to make up ground because other teams would continue to pick up OT and shootout losses. So at a certain point, you would end up with like the Canucks were perpetually, it felt like 4 to 8 points out of a playoff spot, no matter how much they kept winning. And eventually there obviously came a point, I think it was the March homestand, where they leveled out and stopped winning as frequently as they were. But I think it would make playoff races a lot more exciting if you sort of changed up the point system in the standings.
I absolutely love it. Okay, Oznuck asks, PD skating, thoughts on this? Yeah, I don't know. Like it looks different than October. And that's the thing that, like J-Pat brought it up, that Elias Pettersson can't do it on his own and he needs help. But like he was doing it on his own, right? Like he was doing it on his own to start the season, and he just hasn't been lately. And yeah, like I think the skating's one thing of many that's kind of looked off. But although I think he's looked better recently than he did maybe like 2-3 weeks ago, where it looked like he was falling down at least once or twice a shift. Seems like he's staying on his feet a little bit more, which is good. But yeah, I don't know. Do you have any thoughts on PD skating?
I thought he had good jump against the Flyers. If I'm being honest, that line was to me the most consistent in terms of creating offensive threats. I know the third line scored, but in terms of a high volume of scoring chances, the Pettersson line, they were, I think, quietly generating a fair amount of offense. I mean, I'm thinking of, first period, for example, a Pettersson rush where he was in the slot and it looked like he was going to shoot, but then he made a beautiful pass to Kuzmenko. And if it wasn't for Atkinson sliding all the way across and making a desperation block, that was going to be in the back of the net. That was an automatic goal. And honestly, this is the one part that we're kind of forgetting about Pettersson and Kuzmenko last year is their on-ice shooting percentage was really high. So looks and chances like that were going in. And that totally changed the perception of then how we're talking about these players, because we don't remember the chances that almost went in. We only remember the ones that actually converted into goals. And so last night's a perfect example. We're gonna look back at this Flyers game and bring up Pettersson, and nobody's really gonna remember it as, oh, they were pretty effective offensively. And yet if that chance, which under normal circumstances is probably a goal, we'd be talking about them in a different light. And the other thing I wanted to mention is J Pat had mentioned that Pettersson's below the point per game mark recently. And yeah, we haven't seen the best version of him, but I think most of that really has to do with the power play slowing, because you look at 5-on-5 December, which was a much better month for Elias Pettersson. His 5-on-5 play driving numbers as a line were really strong, and the Canucks outscored teams 10-5 in the month of December with Pettersson on the ice again. So after, I think in a month of November, especially the second half, where at even strength he was really struggling, I think he's been driving play and looking better at 5-on-5. We're just hoping that more of those chances can convert, especially once we hopefully see more consistency with his wingers, and that, once the power play gets going, then his point totals will start to rack up too. But I mean, at least the other night in Philly, I thought he was moving pretty well.
Yeah, I thought so as well. I also thought Kuzmenko had a good game. Like, that was something I wanted to get out there. Again, speaking of, if the chance goes in, you're talking about them in a different light. There was that power play opportunity where Kuzmenko made a nice feed cross ice to Brock Besser. And look, like, when we talk about regression and luck, like, Brock Besser got unlucky there, not making full contact with the puck and putting it in the back of the net. Those seem to have all been going in for Brock Besser to start the year. But I thought it was a good game for Andrei Kuzmenko. And, while it sucks to see Höglander be the 13th forward, I was glad to see it wasn't Kuzmenko that came down, because I thought that was more reflective of the performance of those two players last night. Like, I didn't think Nils Höglander had the best game. And there was a couple shifts back to back to start the game. Obviously takes the penalty on the first shift of the game, but his second shift right after that, there was 3 turnovers in the neutral, two turnovers in the neutral zone. And it's just like, that can't happen with Rick Tocchet. It just can't happen. So I was kind of expecting it a little bit, but I don't know if I was expecting 13th forward. I was really thinking it would just be a demotion to the fourth line, but we'll see what happens when the Canucks return in the new year. Grady, you said you have a couple from Facebook here. Let's bring them up. From Facebook. Thoughts on a Jake Gensel rental? This from TK. What other wingers or sellers would you consider? I like Jake Gensel as well, man. I think there's a lot out there. And if I had to give you my top 3 in order, it goes Elias Lindholm, Jake Gensel, and why am I forgetting third? Adam Henrique is like, that's my top 3. That's my top 3 wish list. Elias Lindholm is the golden one for me. Like, that's the number one. I think he improves this team more than anybody else that you can go get on the trade market right now. And then I think Jake Gensel is a very close second. But I like Elias Lindholm because of that kind of that ability to also play center. It just gives the Canucks more roster flexibility. And obviously, like, Lindholm's a legit Selke candidate, right? So brings a defensive element to the game that I think the Canucks could really use in their top 6 as well. So that's why he's my number 1. But I do like Jake Gensel as well.
Yeah, if you had to make a big swing, it for me, it would be Lindholm, because he's a true centerman. And like you mentioned, he's excellent defensively. And what we've seen recently is the Miller line has struggled playing against top lines. And I don't think that's an indictment on Miller. I just think he's naturally best at wing, and he's the type of player that, sure, you can lean on him at center, but if we're going to do that, it's probably best to not have him going up against top lines. So that would immediately solve, I think, especially if you're gonna go through a team like LA that down the middle has Kopitar, Deneau, Dubois. It's a matchup nightmare in terms of three big bodies that are all really good defensively and are surrounded by high quality two-way wingers as well. So if you are swinging big, yes, Gensel is the sexier option as a goal scorer, and I'm sure he'd look great next to somebody like Elias Pettersson, but Lindholm's probably the more practical fit because then you could shift Miller to the wing and he becomes then that dynamic play driving winger that you're looking for.
Yeah, exactly. Okay. Thank you to everybody who contributed to this edition of Anyone Else. And thank you to all of our listeners who listened with us in 2023. I know there was a big change, obviously, on this show as well, but we appreciate all of our listeners. And yeah, we know there's a lot more of you who came over from the Vancast when Harman came on the show. And of course, there's a lot of regular listeners of Canucks Convo as well. So I will say, but first we have to get to Betway, of course, but I will say, from me, Harman Grady, and I'll lump him in, Chris Faber as well. Thank you to everybody who listened to Canucks Convo in 2023. We really appreciate it. And as we shift to the new year, let's get to our Betway bet of the day. Because on New Year's Day, those Seattle Kraken will take down the Vegas Golden Knights on their home soil at T-Mobile Park. I'm curious which Mariners are going to be there. We'll see. We'll see if anybody's in town. I think a lot of guys reported to drive line pretty early. Like I think Ty France bought a place in Seattle. Anyways, the Seattle Kraken to beat the Vegas Golden Knight at -110 odds. A $10 bet will return you $19.09 over on Betway. It must be 19 plus play. If you choose to play, please play responsibly. Harman, closing thoughts for 2023 other than thanking the listeners?
Not a lot beyond that. I mean, it's I'm just grateful that everybody sort of has embraced me with open arms. It's been an absolute blast to do this show. I've had a ton of fun, and I'm glad for Canucks fans' sake that 2023, especially the fall and winter portion, has finally resulted in the team getting back on track. I mean, I remember having conversations last season when I'd occasionally fill in as co-host and during the darkest periods of the season, sort of saying that, hey, you diehards that are sticking around now, that listen to these podcasts, that are on Canucks Twitter, that catch as many games as you can, that are super invested, going through those tough times, you're going to appreciate it and feel that much more excited compared to the people that, you know, no offense to anybody that's just jumping on the bandwagon, because it's always a great time to, like, I'm not one of those people that's like, oh, if you're a bandwagoner, you can't enjoy it. But I do think it hits different when you've been with the team during the lows. And clearly anybody who's listening has followed the team through a lot of these lows. And I'm just excited that Canucks fans finally have a team that's fun, exciting, and genuinely worth cheering for.
All right. I love it. My closing thought of 2023 is we had someone in the chat jump in. Alec Taylor. He said quads 1v1 me in Rocket League. And I just put my email in the chat. I was like, yeah, let's do it. Like, come get some, man. Let's do it. Let's do it. So we'll see. We'll see where this goes. But yeah, Alec, I'll play you in Rocket League. I'm actually not very good at 1v1, so I don't want to start chirping too much, but I'm pretty good at Rocket League. So should be a lot of fun. But Alec might be one of these. I don't know. We'll talk, Alec. We'll talk. We'll figure it out. But Harman, thank you so much, man. Really appreciate it. Grady, you as well. You guys coming on the show has been fantastic. And honestly, obviously they were big size 14, 15 shoes to fill of Chris Faber. And I think you guys have done an admirable job doing that. And I'm really happy with the product that we've put out to close out 2023 and heading into 2024.
Say hi, Tilly.
And Tilly. I'm very happy for Tilly.
Oh, she's being naughty. Yeah, I just wanted to quickly say thanks to everyone watching on YouTube and listening to the pod, and welcome me with open arms as a new producer here, and just excited to finally have a good hockey team to talk about after this last decade of pretty crappy hockey. So yeah, it's good. I'm obviously here with Tilly, and I'm sure she'll be making more appearances when we're working from remotely at home. But yeah, I just want to say happy new year to everyone and good luck on your resolutions, and don't give up after the first 3 days, probably like quads would do. So yeah, that's
yeah, we'll
that.
see. All right. Thanks, guys. Appreciate it so much. And of course, the listeners, thank you so much. We really appreciate your support. So for my co-host Harmon Dial and our technical producer, Grady Sass and Tilly Sass, my name is David Quadrelli. Thank you so much for listening to another episode of the Canucks Conversation.
Canucks Conversation with Harmon and Quads every weekday at 2 p.m. Be sure to check it out on the Canucks Army YouTube channel. And if you missed it, go check it out on your favorite podcast catcher app.